My man, thanks for the short notice step up today. How we doing?
Not too bad. Well, carrying a bit of a cold, to be honest, but I was listening to Drakkar there talking about having to pick which foot to put a boot on. I don't feel as bad maybe now after that. My complaints aren't as big as his, so yeah. I'm okay. I'm not too bad now. It was a great main event anyway, and want to talk about it. There was a lot of talking points from the card, not the best card of all time, but yeah, it feels like there hasn't been a card with as many talking points and as many like small, maybe controversial things that happen. Right. Lots to talk about, I suppose.
Yes, and if there are things that we don't address before we let you go, I certainly want you to bring those to the air. I would imagine for you, given all the content that you push out, you sort of stole my thunder there by setting it up as beautifully as you did. But I'm wondering if you're watching a show like this and thinking, A, there's just so much for me to talk about, and B, Anik's probably going to call after that main event.
There was a little bit of that, all right. It's been a while with the break, and then there weren't that many controversial decisions. So yeah, there was. And when you see a 10-7 as well in the middle of a card, you're thinking like, well, okay, we're going to be having a few chats about this. So I think that when we see 10-7s, we don't see them that often. It's usually a positive chat, so that's a good thing. And yeah, so lots to talk about.
Well, I will start by suggesting that if anybody really wants to be informed when it comes to mixed martial arts scoring and criteria and judging, scoring, interpretation, all of that, just go to @Sean Sheehan BA on X, and there's a video populated that he has pinned right at the top of his page. And even someone like me, I try to watch this thing every 6 or 8 weeks, because when we have a situation like Arnold Allen and Movsar Evloev, sometimes I'm in my own head thinking that I don't know exactly what the rule is. But let us begin, Sean, if we could, with the main event. And I guess if you want to throw your scorecard out there, that is fine. But overall, what were your thoughts on just a great first championship main event of 2024?
Yeah, I thought it was very close. I scored it 3-2 for Strickland, but obviously with the third round, my swing round as well. Look, I think it's kind of a 4-round fight more than anything else. I think the fifth, I think most people would agree that Strickland won it. And even you could even say the first as well. I think most people would agree Strickland won that as well. And you could say the fourth, that Drakkar won it. So most people would agree with that as well. So I think from a competitive fight, 1-4, from a judging fight, it's almost 2 and 3 that we just need to talk about. Two is an interesting one, because I do think Drakkar won it. I think most people would agree that Drakkar won it. We also sometimes have to remember that Strickland won the first. He is the champion, and sometimes in our mind we almost want the challenger to win the second, so we have a competitive fight going into 2, 3, 4, and 5, because if you're 2-0 up after 2, you only have to win one more round, and then so sometimes we have to realize that in our own head and watch it with a cooler mind. Now, having said that, I still do think Drakkar did win that second round. So for me, it comes down to the third. I think the third was very interesting in that it wasn't that interesting. Not much landed in terms of big, impactful blows. I think until the very last shot of the round, where Strickland landed a very nice left hook. And honestly, that was a big part of me scoring it for him. Like in a round like that, you know, when we're watching a round, what are we always looking for? We're always looking for the big, impactful moments, whether it is, you know, a big elbow that cuts you, or a big shot that knocks you down, or a guillotine that maybe someone has to struggle out of, a rear naked choke that they have to pry the hands off of, you know, something like that, something that's going towards the end of the fight. There was almost nothing like that in the third round. So what do we score on? We scored on who landed the most shots and who had the biggest impact from those shots. I think there was very little in it between them. Like Drakkar, as he said himself there, just before I came on, he was talking about how, and you said it to him, how the impact of his shots looked like it was more than Strickland's. And I think the more the fight went on, the less shots Strickland landed, and between 1 and 4, we'll leave 5 out of it for a second. And I think Drakkar, if he had the fight again, I think he'd win it more easily, because I think he'd land more shots and he'd have a little bit more confidence. It's hard to be as confident when you're kind of taking a guy down. He did take Strickland's offense down throughout those first 4 rounds, but he didn't land enough shots to make it clear, right? So I think the third round was the most evident part of that. In the fourth round, he did exactly that. Like, I think if the fight happened again, I think he'd probably have 3 or 4 rounds like the fourth round, because he knows exactly what to do. But in that third round, I just think he was missing a little bit. Strickland was realizing, okay, Drickus is kind of coming into this a bit. Let's roll back a little bit. Maybe not throw as many shots. And because he wasn't throwing as many shots, he wasn't giving Drickus as many opportunities to land, and he wasn't landing as many shots. So I think it came down to that late Strickland shot, the few Strickland jabs that were landing versus the 3 or 4 shots that Drickus landed. It's a toss of a coin. I don't think there's a strong argument either way. I'd argue Strickland just. I think most people are arguing Duplessis, and I couldn't say that they're wrong at all. So I don't think it's a controversial fight at all. It was just extremely, extremely close. And look at the judges as well. All 3 judges scored 4 of the rounds exactly the same. It came down to that 3rd round. So that's pretty consistent.
So, we talked about this off the top of the show, and I guess I just want maybe you to address these folks. Those folks, I understand the dissatisfaction for MMA fans when they see a champion lose his belt and it's a close fight. But to those people who suggest that somehow a champion should be rewarded for making that walk as such, I don't even know if it's an antiquated concept as much as it's such a bad concept. Like, I mean, are there people out there, obviously not employed judges, but do you feel like a big chunk of this fan base, like if they see a close round, they just give it to the champ because he's the champ? Like, what are we doing, Shawnee?
Yeah, there's a lot of idiots out there. I mean, like we can't. If we keep talking about the idiots all the time, we'll just become idiots ourselves.
Sorry for bringing them up.
No, but I hear it all the time. It's a weird. This one's especially weird one, right? Because Sean Strickland got the title shot against Israel Adesanya because Drickus Duplessis was injured, if I'm not wrong, and they wanted it to make a title shot quickly. So, like, the only reason he's the champion and Drickus isn't the champion, possibly now, is because he got the shot first. It could easily have been Drickus was the champion defending against Sean Strickland.
Great point. Great point.
And another point, right? When that fight starts, no one is the champion. That it's like to be the champ, you have to beat the champ comes from pro wrestling. Ric Flair and all that. View it as a pro wrestling ladder match. That belt is hung above the cage, and no one owns it until someone wins, goes up, collects it, and then hands it to them, and then they're the champion. That is in limbo until the fight ends. It's no one is the champion when you step in there. So it's just nonsense. There's a rule set there. There's a criteria there to win every round, and that's how the round winner is picked.
Sean Sheehan with us here on the Anik Florian podcast. Check out his content, Severe MMA, also on SureDog.com. So I want to almost let you prioritize what we talk about, but there was an incident in the pay-per-view opener, Arnold Allen and Movsar Evloev, Mark Goddard stopping the action because of knees that he deemed to be illegal. Some suggesting that Evloev was playing the game a little bit. How'd that play out from your vantage point?
Well, it's interesting because they're using the older rules in Toronto. So you just basically, any part of your body apart from the soles of your feet being on the ground makes you a grounded fighter. So look, Mark Goddard can only officiate the rules which the fight is being fought under. So he made the right decision there. The biggest issue. I
didn't even know that until you said that, and I'm commentating the fight.
That's a massive problem. It's people always saying, my colleague Ian O'Neill said it to me in the podcast this week, what are we doing 2024 having commissions worldwide? You've one rule set here, one rule set there. It's awful. And I come on here to talk about judging all the time, and I've great sympathy for the judges and the referees and the officials. I've very little sympathy for these commissions because they're the ones making the decisions that make it harder on the refs, judges, never mind the fighters, never mind the coaches. If you're Faraz Sahabi or Eric Nixick or something, you're trying to coach your fighter and give him all the information beforehand. You mightn't even know that information until you get there that week. And it's very tough. Like we saw, this is a wilder bit of an example now, but Demetrius Johnson, when he went to one championship and he had to fight under a rule set where grounded knees were allowed, he got knocked out in one of his first fights because it's very, very tough to adjust your game to a different rule set where that's allowed. Now it's not as big of a rule change, I suppose, in Toronto compared to maybe most of the places in America now. But you get what I mean. It's you have to be. You have to have your mindset to the right rule set. But I think just the biggest point I would make on that, right? We understand the rule was a different rule. I think most people don't like it. I think most people would like the new rule better. I think a lot of people would argue the knee should be legal anyway, but that's a discussion for another day. The biggest thing there is the judging, right? So how is a judge supposed to judge that? Do they say, right, all 4 of those knees don't score? Do they say, okay, only 1 knee was illegal, so we'll score the first 3 knees? That's a very tough job for a judge to decipher. Maybe the judge that was on that side of the cage who saw 3 clearly legal knees will score them, and then Mark Goddard called 1 illegal, so they're not going to score that. But what about the people at the other side of it? Like, it's, and I'm not blaming anyone here. I'm just saying exactly what happened, and it's a very tough situation. I think in future, maybe something like maybe Mark Goddard or Kevin McDonald, whoever the referee is, could go to each judge and just say, first 3 knees legal, last 1 illegal. Go to the next judge, do the same thing, just so we know what to score. So it was a very tough situation, that one.
Not to mention the momentum kind of taken away from someone like Arnold Allen, who's in the potential mist of maybe finishing that fight. And I agree. I think there was one that was close. I think a few of them, he actually wasn't hitting him when the hand was touching, but I don't know. That was a crazy fight.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, like, I do think Mark Goddard, in hindsight, definitely made the right decision under the rule set which the fight was taken. So I don't think we can criticize Mark Goddard in any way, shape, or form. We can criticize the commission who put that rule set in, and I think rightly so, because it did swing it away from Arnold Allen, but Mark Goddard had to make that decision. The biggest criticism I would have in that fight is I think Arnold Allen won the fight. I
thought it too.
Yeah, like those takedowns late, like Kenny, like, you're a great grappler. When you watch the grappling in the last 90 seconds of that round, to my mind, you can speak better than this to me, but Arnold Allen was winning that for me. Like, he was getting taken down. Like,
Sean, I would say even in round 1, Evloev was very aggressive pursuing the takedown, but those weren't takedowns. I wouldn't consider that effective grappling. They were basically canceling each other out. So then what do we go to? We go to the striking. So, when I was watching the fight, I was like, okay, I had picked, Arnold Allen as an upset on the podcast. I was like, okay, I think we got this. But then, everything kind of pointed to Evloev. So I was kind of confused on that as well. So I'm glad I'm hearing, someone who I consider an expert when it comes to the rules agree with me there. But I just thought that the takedowns were really nullified by Arnold Allen in round 1 and round 3. And I thought Evloev only won round 2. So it was a bit confusing there.
Yeah, I would 100% totally agree. I think the point about the last 90 seconds of round 1, where Evloev was taking him down and, Arnold Allen was rolling out of it. Now, a lot of people would argue let's leave that fight aside for a second, but, a takedown should score, or getting on top and having top control should score, or dominating the grappling should score. And whereas I think judges and myself would look at it more as like, when you get into a position to get a submission, or when you get a submission on, or forcing someone to defend, is what scores more highly. In this fight, I'd argue that the people on the first example there who want to score, dominating the positions, they don't even have an argument for Evloev in that, because as you said there, Kenny, I think Arnold Allen was winning that as well. So I find it very hard to know how he went. No, it wasn't a blowaway round or anything. It was still relatively close. But I think, Arnold Allen, to me, watching at home, was landing the harder shots. At the start of that, he was rocking his head back multiple times. He was landing some big shots. And I thought he won that round. As I said, not a blowaway, but to me, throughout the whole fight, throughout the whole night, throughout the whole pay-per-view, that was the only round I really had a problem with. I think all the rest of them were very close.
All right, a few more minutes here with Sean Sheehan. I'm going to highlight some other things that happened on this night, and you can go in any direction you want. Sean Woodson beats Charles Air Jourdain. I thought he won the fight. It was a split decision, but the communication is veteran voice of the Octagon, Bruce Buffer, tells Jaron Vallel, referee, who wins the fight. So I understand that Charles and Sean, those first names, sound alike. Not quite like Matt and Matt, but they sound alike. But Jaron Vallel has been communicated to by Bruce Buffer. He knows Sean Woodson won the fight. So what the fuck you doing raising Charles Jourdain's hand? That was messy. Anything for us on that?
Yeah, it was a bit weird. I think it was a bit like the time like the Oscar went to the wrong person or something, wasn't it? Right. And they had to call the other person out. Yeah, it was a bit odd, but yeah, I don't think that was a split decision either. To be honest, I think Sean Woodson won that one.
Okay, yeah, I agree
pretty comfortably. The other fight was the Tavares and the Saidi fight, and obviously the cut in the second round, and we had obviously a lot of talk and the commentary about cuts and everything like that. The cut happened in the second round. It was a very close round, and 2 of the 3 judges scored it for the guy who got cut. So, we've had, I suppose, that discussion before, and we'll have it many times again. It's impact is not just lacerations. Lacerations are part of it, and they definitely score more, but the actual impact in terms of someone getting knocked down or someone getting badly concussed is a big part. And just on the 10-7 as well, John, because I know we're probably cut for time.
Please.
I'll tell you why that 10-7 is important, and I discussed it on the Severe MMA podcast if people wanted a longer maybe discussion on it, but Sal Damato scored that 10-7. And you've talked about Sal before. Sal is the leader of the judges. People look up to Sal. Yep. And I met 4 or 5 of the judges there before Christmas at a Bellator event, and Sal was there as well, and we had a great chat. And they all kind of said, we look up to Sal. If Sal does something, it feels like we can also do it. And I think that is a great decision Sal made to give that a 10-7. Now, I actually don't think it was a 10-7. I think it was a 10-8, but it was close. But for him to give it a 10-7, it gives the opportunity for, whether you're Derek Cleary or Jordan Vallel or whoever you might be going into a fight and it's a borderline 10-7, you can give that fight 10-7. You can go into the meeting afterwards where the commission is saying, okay, why did you score that at 10-7? You can say, well, I watched Jasmine Jasovicius against Priscilla Cachoeira. Sal Damato scored that 10-7. I think this was a similar round, and that's why I scored at 10-7. So for Sal to put his head above the parapet to make that sort of decision, it's not an easy decision to make. We don't have that many 10-7s. You see, when people heard about it, what did they say? What are all the tweets? A rare 10-7, Yes. So I think that was a big decision, very brave judging and very good judging as well, and I think it'll help things in the future.
You articulated that well, and I like the adjective brave. We need brave judging. We need more liberal use of 10-8s and 10-7s. Even if I would defer to Sean Sheehan's scorecard over Sal Damato's and he had a 10-8, we need people in those seats to actually throw out 10-7s. Would you ever judge or no?
I probably couldn't. I've talked too much about.
Yeah, you talk too much shit.
Maybe an amateur fight in Ireland or something. But yeah, so no, I don't think I can.
Why I am reluctant to shout out the live odds at times is because for me as a sports bettor, unless I'm looking at a live playable line, I don't even like throwing that out there because of the timing. But Surrey City at one point was the -425 live favorite, and I did think he won that fight. And I do feel bad for him a little bit. I feel like maybe they didn't get the fight of the night bonus in some part because Tavares missed weight, but I thought you highlighted that well. And I will just say of my criticism of Sal Damato, if you want to call it that, and please just know this is Jon Anik talking as mixed martial arts fan, not as MMA commentator, right? Because Sal's probably the judge that I'm closest to. Like if any judge is getting a Christmas card from me, it's probably him. But here is just my point. With a backdrop thesis statement that I believe we need more elite judges, and we don't have that. But Sal obviously is one of the best. But my whole thing is just, and I think you'll be dismissive of this because it's a little bit conspiracy theorist, but back in 2022, and I'll say this quickly, Sal Damato scored a main event at the Apex for Jack Hermanson. He had it 4-1 for Jack Hermanson, 49-46. Sean Sheehan, I have Sean Strickland in here. I was afraid I was going to do that. Sean Sheehan scored that fight 50-45 for Strickland. Not a single media scorecard on MMAdecisions.com had the fight for Jack Hermanson. Sal was roundly criticized for that card. And I remember thinking at the time, he's a human being with a subconscious. Next time he refs Sean Strickland, Sean's probably going to get the close rounds. Now, you can say to me, there's no fucking way, John. Sal is elite. He would never let that cloud into his brain, but he can't control every fucking stem of his brain. So my suggestion is if you have a wayward scorecard, a scorecard like that is so wayward, if we had enough elite judges, I would like to see Sal Damato removed from the next few Sean Strickland or Jack Hermanson fights, because even though I agree with Sal Damato's next scorecard, that was a split decision. He was the dissenting judge for Sean Strickland versus Jared Cannonier. I just think you can't help but have some sort of thing in your subconscious that I've been so wrong about this guy and his style relative to the masses before that in the close rounds here, my subconscious is giving the round to Sean Strickland. Am I crazy?
I think so. Yeah, I think you are. Like I would argue, right? If that was the case, I actually think it would be the next fight on, in the next main event that you would look at adjusting your score more, because by the next time you judge a Sean Strickland fight, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, whatever. I don't, and also, right, it goes against everything that judges, commissions, and I'll talk about, because what did they talk about? They talk about fighter A versus fighter B, right? They're not looking at Sean Strickland. They're not looking at Drakkar Duplessis, and they shouldn't, because if you bring in any preconceptions with you, you're going to look at a fight differently.
Right.
And I've spoken to judges about that before, and it's a massive thing that they avoid, and they consciously avoid it. You have to look at it down the middle, because you can go into a fight and you can think, I don't know, an example, Mark Hunt versus JDS, right, years ago. Who hits harder, right? You could say, okay, maybe Mark Hunt, you think hits harder. But as the fight went on, you can think, actually, maybe not. JDS actually hits harder. If you watch the fight with a preconception that Mark Hunt hits harder, you're going to score every punch he lands more. So you can't go in with that preconception. And it's more even like, say, like a jiu-jitsu guy is fighting a striker, and next thing, jiu-jitsu guy starts beating up the striker on the feet, right? Right. Sometimes we can go overboard and say, oh, well, he's beating him up on the feet. We thought he was going to lose and we're going to score it more. But you can't do that. You have to look at it blue corner versus right corner. You have to look at it fighter A versus fighter B. And the judges do a great job of that. I would not question Sal Damato at all in that sort of realm. I don't think he has a bias. I also think he is and you know him, he's a very strong character. Yep. He's the type of guy that'll put in a card, everyone will criticize it, and he'll be thinking about it forever. He'll be thinking about the card because he'll go back and he'll watch it and he'll think, is that justifiable? Is that justifiable? Is that justifiable? Yeah. And if you say it is, fair enough, he can move on. And he'll say, okay, maybe I could do something better with that in the future. It's not going to be in the future with a Sean Strickland fight. It's going to be in the future with prelim 1 of the next weekend, right, prelim 2 of the next weekend, main event of the next weekend. So no, I would dismiss that as a concern.
And I do think Sean Strickland is a hard guy to sort of assess, but 3 split decisions recently for Sean Strickland, and Sal Damato's been the dissenting judge, disagreeing with his contemporaries in all 3 of those fights, at least when it came to the final scorecard. All right, 2 more minutes with Sean Sheehan. I know that you feel like the issue is not the criteria, it's the overall knowledge and understanding of it. But if you could change one thing in MMA judging or scoring, would there be one thing?
I would take away well, there'd be a couple of things. I would take away the first 2 parts of the criteria. I take away the octagon control, I take away the effective aggressiveness, and I just have an impact. I'd simplify it. I know a lot of people want to add more things onto the criteria. I'd make it a lot simpler, because the problem with the criteria is, right, you could add on 100 pages and it still wouldn't give you every little intricacy. Like, you could add on 100 pages, and in that 100 pages, I guarantee you, if there was a criteria written with every little intricacy, you would not have a written line that would tell you exactly what to do in the Arnold Allen knees to the head situation. You wouldn't have it. Right. So you have to have, and I actually spoke to a judge today who had the exact same thing happen in a fight recently. And he said it was an absolute nightmare because the referee stopped them, assessed them, and this was in a card that was it wasn't, let's put it this way, it wasn't in an English speaking region and didn't have an English speaking referee. So from his mind, the referee didn't even warn the fighter, so you just scored the knees even though they looked completely illegal. So Mark Goddard warned Arnold Allen, so you don't score the knees. But if someone doesn't warn the fighter, then you have to score the knees because they're not seen as illegal. So but to know that situation, have been in that situation before, to be aware of it, it's absolutely massive. Like there's certain judges that have never scored an incomplete round. So, it goes to the 3rd round, someone catches an illegal knee and it goes to the cards. You have to score 10 seconds of it. We saw it with over in PFL with the Brendan Loughnane Ryoji Kudo fight last year that I'm sure you were calling, Kenny. Yep. How many judges have had to score an incomplete round like that before? It doesn't happen that often. So to be put in that situation to do it, that is written in the criteria. But in that, look, and here's the example as well. That's the exact sort of situation where octagon control and effective aggressiveness are in the criteria. Because if it's 10 or 15 seconds, you use that. Yeah. Well,
So Sean, it would be that over the amount of blood in a round as a criteria. I'm kidding. I saw your tweet.
No,
I don't want to get you upset.
I'm bad enough on Twitter, but yeah. I know, John, you tried your best, John. In fairness, you tried your best, but what can you? What are you
that
feeling?
Was hilarious.
Can I ask you a question? What are you feeling?
I can literally see John and Sean in my eyes, like, it's short circuiting their brains. Yeah.
It's really not my habitual nature to correct anyone, especially a former world champion. Even earlier when we were talking today about UFC 300 and Kenny said 11 months instead of 11 weeks, I didn't correct him because it's not my nature. You know what I mean? So not to throw you under the bus now, but no, I sort of paused and there was some communication with my producer, Zach Candido on Talkback, and just decided to sort of get in there a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think some people there's a stubbornness with me, with Dom. It is what it is. But I think bigger picture, Sean, you're just such a credit and an asset for us. And even in terms of that situation you were describing with Loughnane, as a commentator too, you want to go through this stuff, right? Like, I can't remember the last time we invoked the old rules, and you breaking that news to the play-by-play guy 48 hours after the show should be alarming to MMA fans and people around the world. So, well, Sean, we appreciate you more than anything else. Severe MMA's Sean Sheehan at Sean Sheehan BA. Don't be a stranger, buddy. We'll probably talk to you in a few weeks. Sincerely appreciate the overtime today, sir.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good day. Sean.